Yeah, there's something really wrong with having your 17-year-old kid patrolling the streets with an automatic AR-15. Like, especially you're 17, you're not even a fully developed human yet, and you have the power, that kind of power in your hands. And not only that, but you're thrown into this chaos where there's going to be conflict no matter what. So, like, I think it's not only a cultural problem for sure, but like the parents, where the fuck are this kid's parents at?
Yeah, and that gets complicated because the "where are the parents" is also used by some on the right to justify law enforcement treating poor and non-white youth in a way that we know is completely counterproductive. So where are the parents is very relevant, but I also want to be careful with just throwing that off as a sort of blanket thing. But when people get into this stuff about, well, listen, this was a good guy with a gun because he also had a first aid kit, or this is a bad guy with a gun because 2 weeks before he sucker punched a teen girl, it really misses the bigger cultural point that I think you and I are kind of making here.
Either way, it's just fucked up, period, for a 17-year-old to be carrying a weapon like that out in the middle of the streets in the middle of a riot like that. Like, there's no place for him to be there. At the same point, there's no point for, not making any excuses for anybody, but the guy who like ran up behind him trying to hit him in the head, like, why would you run up behind a kid with an automatic weapon trying to take him out? Like, it just seems like a bad idea on both sides.
Yeah, sure. And you can make the case that the person who ran up behind him saw the guy with the gun as a threat and wanted to stop the threat, and that it was maybe ill-conceived. I mean, this is the problem. It's
Good point too.
what we know is a problem is a 17-year-old in a different state than the one in which he lives, illegally walking around with a rifle, right? That's definitely a problem. The other stuff, a lot of it is, details that are going to have to be sorted out.
On top of all of it, I just don't feel like, I feel like one of the best arguments against Trump is that, he is not being a leader the way he talks to people. Like, when you're constantly just making excuses and blaming other people and just talking the way you do and just talking shit 24/7 about anybody and everybody on Twitter, it's not somebody that you can, I just don't feel like he has those characteristics of a leader that you would want to run a country, especially the most powerful country in the world.
Well, obviously, that's my perspective. But I think that you don't have to only ask the opinions of partisan Americans to get a valid opinion on that. If you look around the world, the United States under Trump is not part of more and more important conversations about climate, conversations. I mean, listen, the US, Trump announced that he will not be joining the global effort for equitable distribution of a coronavirus vaccine. We're just out of a lot of important conversations that we should be leading on. Instead of just not leading, we're not even in a lot of these conversations. It's embarrassing. But under coronavirus, with the death toll approaching 200,000, it's not just that countries are laughing at us, they actually pity us. I mean, it's a real change compared to what the United States was under previous administrations.
What is your opinion on healthcare and like where we're at now and what can be fixed? Like, what do you think like the best case scenario for healthcare in the country would be under Joe Biden if he got elected?
Sure. So Joe Biden's plan on healthcare is not Medicare for all. That's very clear. And he says he's not for Medicare for all. But if Joe Biden gets his way, he's going to be able to do some pretty important things. So one is Joe Biden would create a public option. And the public option is where Barack Obama started the negotiation with Obamacare, and it ended up being negotiated away. And a public option is no panacea, but it would be a really important thing to have a public option. It would put downward pressure on prices from private insurers, and it would be a really great thing to have. Joe Biden has also talked about significantly increasing subsidies for people to reduce the number of people that are without healthcare, to make it more affordable. Again, it's like there are better plans that are more comprehensive, but if Joe Biden could do both of those things, it would give millions of additional people healthcare people who don't have it right now. And then Biden has said he would be open to lowering the age where you can get Medicare. So currently it's 65.
Mm-hmm.
And if that were lowered to 60 or 55, that's also millions of Americans who could get on Medicare who currently can't. So, is it nothing? No, these are significant proposals. Is it Medicare for all? Certainly it's not. Is it going to get everybody health care? No. It'll get relatively close, but it's not going to get everybody health care. But these would be, listen, when you compare to the Trump proposals of 2017, which would have kicked about 25 million people off of health care, if you give me the option, take healthcare away from 25 million or give it to 25 million more, I know which one I choose every time.
Yeah, I hear a lot of arguments. I mean, you're in Boston, I'm in Florida. I'm on like the west coast of Florida. Throughout my life and my upbringing, I've always thought of Republicans as being wealthy people who don't want to pay a lot of money and don't want to pay a lot of tax, right? And what I've noticed more and more and more in the last couple of years is that a lot of the people who are Trump supporters, especially around here, who I just have everyday conversations with, one of their biggest reasons for being Trump supporters is not wanting to pay tax and wanting to pay less tax. And they say that, the Democrats will socialize everything and, commies, blah, blah, blah. And more of the most outspoken Trump supporters aren't even they're probably in one of the lowest tax brackets.
So this has been studied pretty extensively, because you're right that if you look at it and you say, wait, why do these Trump supporters want taxes lowered for people who earn way more money than them? Like,
right.
It doesn't seem to make any sense. One person who studied this quite a bit is Jonathan Haidt. He's a social psychologist. And what he has found is that it seems as though the behavior is irrational at the individual level. Like, yes, lower someone else's taxes and not mine. That doesn't really seem to make sense. But what Jonathan Haidt found is that it's consistent with group priorities. So if you are a Republican and you identify in total with the package of Republicanism, and that can include whatever is important to you in it, right? It could be being against abortion or being against gay marriage, or what could be anything, that you were sort of saying, this policy of lowering tax on people that are far richer than I am is good for my group. And even if it's not good for me in a direct way, because it's good for my group, as I've been told, I'm going to go for it anyway. And it really comes down to group priorities. And you can find like evolutionary stuff to support this, and there's psychology material to support it. But that's the gist of it, where it's like, that's what explains people supporting policies that don't really seem like they would actually benefit them.
Yeah, it's more of the tribalism coming out, right?
Yeah, and tribalism has become a sort of fraught term in the sense that it's now thrown around sometimes appropriately and sometimes not, and then it's used as a pejorative, and but from a evolutionary social psychology standpoint, there's a lot of scholarship that explains this pretty well.